And you know what? We realize everyone has gone through something like that, and that we are uniquely qualified to help the people that we're with. When you remind people of that in a work environment, it changes everything, because now you're not just showing up for a job. Now you're like, man, you know what? I'm here for a reason. What is that reason?
Welcome back to the Kris Krohn Show. I've got Rudi Riekstins with me. Rudi, how are we doing, brother?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me.
You are out there in the world known very much for what you're doing in businesses by transforming cultures, basically uplifting companies. Ultimately, they're hiring because they want 10x growth. They want 3x growth. They want to get somewhere. But you have a very bizarre way of going about it. You're not going in there necessarily teaching like critical drivers, KPIs, like business functions, like let's go harder on the whole game of how do we do business better? What are you doing instead?
You know, I'm wanting to remind people that there's two ways to live your life. You can live your life purposefully, carefully, calculatedly, which is to get into the flow and allow the business and the opportunity and the abundance to flow to you. Or you could be caught up in the hustle and the drive and the forcing to make things happen. The difference or the alternative between the two is just one is a really joyful way to live. And when you and your people show up in a joyful way to live, you happen to make more money at the same time. So it's a win-win.
We are living in this mental health crisis that came out of the pandemic. And I don't know if we're ever going to recover from it, because we've got a lot of large corporations that are really worried about the mental health of their people, because there's this connection between how people feel about their personal life, which you'd normally think is not the business of a corporation, and then how they actually perform at work, which is the business of the corporation. Tell me a little about what's happened in the last 5 years, because it's definitely creating a spot for you.
You know, people, when COVID came, were faced with the reality that they didn't necessarily like every facet of their life. And they had a lot of time to think about the facets of their lives that were working and the facets of their lives that were not working. And so people started questioning their lives, their marriages, how they were showing up. They started looking at their business. What do they do for a living? How much money do they make? Where are they going? Are they going to ever achieve what it is they want to have, be, and do? And so it put a spotlight on people. And then the world kind of went back together again, but it didn't go back together the same way. And so all of the thoughts and the feelings and the trials and tribulations that people had experienced inside of COVID have now come back into work. And that's why we had the mass resignation right as we got back from COVID, where people started saying like, actually, you know what? I don't really want to be in this job anymore. That's why we had so many divorces, because people were like, I don't want to be in this marriage anymore. It created such turmoil in the individuals because they realized they weren't happy. When you're caught up in the rat race, you're just doing what you're doing and you don't have time to process. And COVID really supported people years ago now to create that pause, to create that shift. We're still dealing with the ramifications of that. I still think it's the best thing that's ever happened. Now, I'm not saying COVID was the best thing that ever happened, because I'm not. But I'm saying that the pause and the opportunity to give us the moment to self-reflect and to look back and say, am I happy? Is this the life I want to be living? Am I making the impact I want to be making? And then to be able to create that change. And so companies are going to be dealing with that. And you beautifully articulated now that some organizations are saying, hang on a minute, we have people working for us. They're human beings. They have their own thoughts, their feelings, their own problems, trials, tribulations. We should probably have some concern for who are they and how are they showing up at work. Prior to COVID, we didn't see that a lot. There would be very few like unicorn companies that would pour into their people. Now, employees are expecting their employers to pour into them.
How did that shift happen? Like what gives them the right to demand such a thing that has to do with such a personal matter in their own lives?
You know, when we came back, I say we, like you and I were there. When we came back from World War II, you know, what happened was these generals came into corporate America and they had very high positions, military styled leadership. And so emotion and compassion was taken out of business. And, you know, we were told to leave our thoughts and our feelings at home. You're here to do a function, get your job done, and you need to produce at a really high level. Well, with COVID, all of a sudden we started realizing, hang on a minute, we're human beings. And when we go to work, our problems don't just stay at home. We don't leave them in the car and then pick them back up when we leave the office. We're taking them with us. Our trials, our tribulations, everything that we're going through, our successes, our failings forward, all come with us to work. What employees are starting to realize now is because people are starting to be more vocal, saying, hey, I don't want to work in an environment where you don't value me or you don't see me or you don't appreciate me. And that is just because people started saying, I'm not going to work for this money anymore under these conditions. And they started being more vocal. The benefit of that was organizations are turning around and saying, okay, hang on a minute. Now, maybe we should start looking at it. But for anyone that's listening to this and thinking, hey, I'm never going to do that. I'm not going to bring that into my business. I still want the job. I want the function. I don't want to care about the problems. We're starting to see the most beautiful shift that when organizations pour into their people first, then the job, then all of a sudden the people start to change. The people's lives change. Their fulfillment changes. When their fulfillment changes, their joy levels change. When that changes, the business starts to make money because they tap into creativity, inspiration, they use intuition. All of a sudden, there's this camaraderie at work. People work harder and actually produce 70% more results in a happy environment than they do if they're in the hustle and the grind.
So we can complain and say, wait a second, it's not a corporation's job to have to get into a person's personal life. But actually, you're saying if they care about the ultimate productivity of the members of their team, then they actually should?
They should, but not get involved in their personal lives. Just create an avenue that if somebody in the business is wanting to explore personal development, growth, happiness, joy, fulfillment, freedom, that there is an avenue to do it, that we create a safe space. Inside of my businesses, and I would argue probably inside of your businesses, you create a safe space with your team where they can share their own personal thoughts, their feelings. They get to bring their brilliance and their genius of who they are and what they do. My wife is the senior vice president of a $1 billion organization, and she hosts motivational conferences for them. It has nothing to do with her job, nothing to do with her title, but she just freaking loves it. And so when she does this, productivity goes through the roof. The company starts to make more money, and she stays.
And the company has to have some kind of budget for this then, because it's like that stuff costs money.
Yeah, millions of dollars a year. But they're making hundreds of millions on the back end of these events.
This is like kind of a new thing. It's like, okay, we need a budget. It's not for marketing. It's actually a budget to invest in the productivity of my people by basically, creating a space for them where they can feel accepted, a space where it's safe for them to connect, to communicate, to have camaraderie. Is that really what you're talking about?
75% of the human population is suffering chronic stress more than 75% of the time. That's the latest data that came out of COVID. And
75% of the population, 75% of the time.
That is literally every waking minute of the day. So if you take the 6 to 8 hours that people are sleeping, 75% of the population, the entire world, is living in chronic stress. If you are in a state of stress, not chronic stress, just a state of stress, you lose brain function, you lose logic, you lose reason, you lose inspiration, intuition, and you lose the ability to be creative. And so if you're in a role at work where you've got to be creative, you've got to come up with new ways of doing things, or if you have to have logic, or you have to have reason, or maybe inspiration or intuition, or you've got to collaborate. If you're in a state of stress, just a momentary stress, you lose all of those faculties and then you actually shut down. And it takes you 40, 50 minutes to get back to a state of being calm. The problem is 75% of the world is living in that state of chronic stress right now. So we have a stress pandemic. And if you look at the volume of people that are living in heightened chronic stress, they're not thinking with logic or reason. They're not being creative. They are literally fighting for their lives every single day. And they're not doing it in a moment. They're doing it the entire day. So now you imagine your employees showing up at work in that state. They're not being the best version of themselves. They're not moving the project forward. They're not creating the innovation. They're literally fighting for their lives.
This is your expertise. So you go into companies, whether it's an Inc. 100 or 5,000, and you're basically asked, they bring you and say, hey, of course we want more productivity. We don't really understand what your methods are. How do we fix this? And so my guess is some of them have got to be wondering, it's like, dude, if we're going to spend money on Rudi, if we're going to bring him in, like, what's he going to do? Is he going to teach like traction principles? Is he going to teach KPIs and critical drivers and financials and like business skills that will really elevate the people? Or are you doing something different? Because when you work with companies and you're talking about helping them double, 3x, 5x, 10x, which you've historically been able to do with a number of organizations, I'm assuming that it's like some kind of, business or productivity hack that you're bringing into the organization. What is it you're actually doing?
So what I'm really doing is I'm going in and I'm working with the individual. And when I say the individual, I don't mean one-on-one. Yes, I work with the leader of the organization on an individual basis, but everybody else is either in a group setting, or it's in group trainings, or it's in online portals, or it's in courses, programs, etc. But what we do is we support each person inside of the organization to lower their volume of stress, to take accountability for their thoughts, their feelings, to understand how they think and they feel and how they show up. Then we give them tools in how to create intentionally in their day. We then elevate their leadership style, support them in understanding how to take accountability for where they are in their life, for what they're doing, for where they're going. We help them find and create connection, value, and meaning in their existing job, meaning why are you here? Yeah. And what is the value and the benefit of you being here? And then we give them elevated leadership tools. So there's a series of steps that we do over 6 months or 12 months. And as people move through this, they change how they show up. And when they change how they show up, it changes how they behave. And when their behaviors change, then everything inside the business starts to change.
Okay, so I don't want to oversimplify things, but I think what you're saying is if you have these methods for reducing stress, productivity goes up.
Yes, 70%.
And do you mean that, by stress, do you mean like anxiety?
Yes.
Okay, so very specifically, like I'm just imagining like when I feel anxious, where it's just like things don't feel right. I need to talk it out. I need to somehow put some kind of effort or energy into something to feel like my world can feel right again. That's kind of what you're talking about.
You see, what you just said now is when I'm feeling anxious, I need to talk it out, right? Except when you're feeling anxious in that moment, your brain has gone into a default pattern. Your unconscious mind has overridden your conscious mind. Your conscious mind has taken a back seat.
Can't even speak sometimes.
And you're no longer in control.
Okay.
And so the thoughts that you're thinking is actually the brain going into your memory banks of any time you've ever felt the same way. It's bringing back memories of every time. They're playing in your unconscious mind up to 85,000 times in a single day. Every single one of these thoughts, every one of these memories, they're producing emotions in your body that create more anxiety. Your brain perceives 10 million bits of data every single second, sight, sound, smell, and it narrows down to only 50 bits that you, in that moment, are logically, consciously processing. 50 bits out of 10 million.
So, okay, so we're actually breaking this down further. So what you're basically saying is when a person feels anxious or when they feel stress, their brain isn't functioning the right way. They're not able to basically focus on their productivity tasks or what they're supposed to do there at work. They're literally mentally unwell. Like when we talk about mental health crisis, this is it.
They're fighting for their life.
They're fighting for their life.
Yeah, and it could be because, you know what?
Fight or flight.
Their wife, forgot to stick a check in the mail. It could be so easily rectified, but in that moment, it becomes a really big deal. It could be, oh, I didn't send the email on time. And you think about how long somebody sits in a state of chronic stress where the brain's bringing memories of every time they've done something cinema, every time something's ever gone wrong. It's forecasting every potential of how bad it could get. They're not doing anything productive to move forward.
I want to draw an unfair correlation here because I'm curious about something. Like, I don't know if the pandemic caused this or accentuated this, but I do know that even prior to the pandemic, there was a lot of complaints about kind of the up and coming generation, the millennials. They would complain about their entitlement issues, or they would expect things that the previous generation didn't. Do you think we have gotten mentally weaker? Like, is the mental health crisis that the generations and the way that things are shifting, or the way that our world works today, or the way our brains are wired to the way social media and how fast things are moving, like, are we just breaking in our brain? Are we evolving? Are we getting better? Are we getting worse? Like, if we call it a mental health crisis, kind of sounds like people are less equipped more than ever before to deal with their mental health.
You asked a beautiful question, and the answer is so much more complicated than the response I can give you. But I actually think that this is part of the process of evolution. If I go back to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, if I even look at my father would go to work. He's still alive today, but I'm saying my father would go to work when I was a kid. He'd come home, he'd have a bad day. He would sit on the couch, he'd crack a beer. He would need his 10, 15, 20 minutes to create separation from his day, and then he could be at home with his kids, right? That was him processing his stress, his unfulfillment, whatever was going on in his day, and he internalized it and he just put it away because he wasn't allowed to have feelings.
And they were basically, back then, that was just more of an acceptable way. So your work would come home and basically you'd bring some bad energy into your home life because at work you weren't allowed to have it.
And now today, if we look at just how we're, changing, people are being more vocal and they're saying, I don't want to feel that way. I feel very upset. They're naming their emotions. The healthiest thing that we can do is actually name our emotions. When we start to take accountability for how we feel, for where we're going, for what we're doing, we could potentially live better lives. And if we live better lives, wouldn't we be happy? And if we were happier and 70% more productive, wouldn't we achieve more and create more success?
Okay, so you're a peak performance coach.
Yes.
You've been tasked to go in. This organization says, we're trying to go for some extreme growth here. Maybe they're having conversations saying we're having a hard time with some of our people because they're getting very vocal about these things. Like, we hear you're the guy. Rudi, you come to the organization. What do you do?
First thing I do is I spend a month or two working with the leader of the organization so that from the top, we start to trickle the information down. When the leader starts to change how they think and how they feel, their terminology is going to change. When their terminology changes, their behavior changes, and people start to notice there's a shift. Then we start to impact the individuals, and then we give them all of the different tools and skill sets. And these are simple tools and techniques that we can teach in 20, 30, 40 minutes that people can apply into their life in 20 minutes in a single day. And it's going to produce profound changes in how they show up to work and how they show up just to life. When they start to become happier, their home life gets happier, their work life gets happier, they form friendships at work. People undervalue this. There are studies that show that if somebody has a best friend at work, or if they enjoy the people they go to work with, they will work there for significantly less money.
Yeah.
I had an executive call me where he was offered, he was headhunted for 70% more money. And he said, man, I'm going to stay because I have a best friend at work.
Yeah.
70% pay cut, essentially, because he didn't take this other headhunted job.
So money is not everything anymore.
No.
But the environment, the culture, and how people feel. That's kind of the new thing.
Thoughts produce feelings. Thoughts and feelings drive behavior. And for the first time in a very long time, we're giving voice to the way we feel. And if we can feel an emotion at work, and we can curate an emotion at work, and we can get our people to feel this heightened feeling of fulfillment, of joy, of impact, of what they do means or matters, and that they're moving something forward and they're a part of something bigger or greater than them, people actually show up to work sooner. They want to work longer. They want to work more intense on what they're doing. Their productivity levels go through the roof because all of a sudden they've now not taken just a paycheck. They now have meaning and value in what it is that they're doing. And that all comes from the simple formula that we're not paying attention to the feelings. Before, we would have a thought, we would feel the emotion, we would bury the emotion, and then we would just go into overdrive, which is the behavior. And now we're saying, hang on a minute, I get to choose how I feel, where I am, what I'm doing, and it changes all of the behavior.
So let's play. Like I'm an employee. I'm part of a department for a company that you've been working at. Things are trickling down, and I'm reported at work as just being super emotional, disconnected, irritated, frustrated. I'm complaining. Other people are complaining about me. Like, I bet you see something like that on a regular basis.
Almost every day.
Yeah. How do you approach me in this?
So there's a longer process because there's a buy-in process that we haven't touched to. But if somebody was looking to be able to create the change, the first thing I would do is I would ask 3 questions. I would create a safe space where we could have a real meaningful conversation. What we're going to be talking about, nobody's going to hear. This is between you and me. My sole intention is in the next 1 hour that I can give you a tool, a tip, a trick, a hack that's going to create a change in your life. And then after that, if you apply it to your life, you're going to have that change. And the 3 questions I would ask is, what's not working in your life right now? And I would just let them ramble. Like, wow. Tell me everything that's not working.
What's not working?
And then it's going to be like, oh, I don't like this person at work. Oh, this person I'm in relations with, whatever, my bank account, my health, whatever. And they list all the things
basically
that aren't
working. It's just bitch.
Yeah, 100%.
Like just 100%. Like, tell me everything that's not going down.
Yeah. Then my follow-up question to that is, if you could have anything and everything in your life that you would want it to be, what would you want your life to be? So now what I'm doing is I'm getting the forecast, a goal, or a vision. And I do this with companies. The same exercise is done with organizations. My first meeting with a company will be, what's not working in your business right now? And then if you could, what would you want it to be? So same formula. Now they're telling me, oh, I want to have $1 million in my bank account. I want to be happily married. I want to have kids that love me. I want all these things. I want to have a job where I'm respected. So they list all these things. The third question is where they get to take accountability. And that is, okay, what's preventing you from living that best life right now? And that's where the work starts.
Okay, so this is almost like, without ever using the V word, like no one wants to be called a victim. You're essentially helping them self-identify their victimhood. What's not working? What do you want? And where are you in the way? Or how are you showing up and operating that is keeping you from getting what you want?
Yeah. You see, I don't believe in victimhood. And I add value and meaning.
I want to hear this.
I believe in value and meaning in everything. And there have been instances in my life where I have been victimized, where something has happened to me which I couldn't control.
Yeah.
But when I get up from that moment, like getting up off the floor after having a gun put to my face and somebody telling me he's going to kill me.
Which happened to you in real life?
Happened to me in
3
real
times.
Life. 3 times. 3 separate instances, all slightly different. But the last one was an armed robbery. The man said, get down on your hands and knees. He put the gun to my eyes, pulled back the cock, and I literally thought that was the last thing I'm ever going to see. They were a gang that had notoriously gone and killed everybody that they had robbed, like the manager or the owner of each restaurant business I was in at the time. And he put me down on my hands and knees, and that was it. I just knew it was coming. And then he left. And I just stayed in that moment thinking, wow, like, is he still there? And I waited at least 5 minutes before I opened my eyes. And he had left. He decided not to shoot me. But I could be in that moment the victim because I didn't invite the guy with the gun. I was minding my own business. It was Easter Sunday. And he walked into my business with his 4 armed friends. But when I'm talking about victimhood and accountability, it's you have to take accountability for not what happens to you, but how you get to show up to what happens to you. I bring value and meaning into life and into business. And the greatest way to be able to do that is to remind people that there is a divinity that has orchestrated everything. If you just look at the caterpillar turning into the butterfly, there is a divinity there that we cannot even articulate in English language. It's just how beautiful and profound does all of this happen to turn into what it's going to be. Well, your life has that same level of divinity. I have shared with you previously, privately, that, as a child, I was sexually assaulted by an older female cousin. I was 6 years old. And, I had a lot of shame, a lot of trauma. I didn't understand it. I felt like a victim. And I've grown up today, and in my 40s, I work with organizations all over the world, and more than 60% of the people I work with have suffered that form of assault.
So you can identify and have compassion.
And now I sit back every time I've got an executive and they're crying and they've told me they've been raped or beaten or abused and they've never told a soul in their life before. And all of a sudden in that moment, I have value and meaning to my experience. I don't feel like a victim anymore. I'm grateful for my experience. I wouldn't ask for it, but because I had it and I have the vantage point and I've had the healing, I can teach it. And so now if I go into an organization and I remind people, every single person in an organization has felt like a victim. Everybody has felt ridiculed, shamed, blamed. We can go through the list. But every one of those moments has value and meaning. And because we're in a room together, because someone's listening to this podcast, there's value for them. Because somebody works somewhere, there's value for them. Because somebody's in a relationship, there's value for them. Yeah. And if you can, instead of turning around and saying, how are these things affecting me? Instead say, why would I choose them? Now, we didn't choose them. Let me be very clear, Kris. We did not choose them. But if we pretend we did, there's new information that comes. Yeah. So if I say, why did I choose to be assaulted at 6 years old? Knowing I didn't choose it, but if I'm pretending to play the game, well, then I could say, wow, well, then I could have all the pain and the suffering and the healing, and then I could teach it and I could help millions of people heal. Oh, well, now there's value to it. Meaning. And when everyone in a business can take that same thing. I had a leader of an organization, 3,000 employees. I'm not going to go into her story, but she has very publicly shared in front of her company a number of times after having done this work with us that she was sexually assaulted by a family member for a period of 7 years. And there was a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, didn't tell her parents, didn't tell anybody. And then she stood up at a company conference, invited her father to sit in the back of the room. And he wasn't the perpetrator, but he sat in the back of the room and heard her stand on stage in an empowered fashion, talking to her entire company and sharing, hey, this was what happened to me and I got to heal and here's what I learned from it. And at the end of that event, hundreds of people stood in line and shared with her privately, oh my gosh, you've given voice to something that happened to me. I've had this experience. It was the most beautiful, profound healing moment. And you know what? We realize everyone has gone through something like that, and that we are uniquely qualified to help the people that we're with. When you remind people of that in a work environment, it changes everything, because now you're not just showing up for a job. Now you're like, man, you know what? I'm here for a reason. What is that reason?
Yeah, that meaning starts creating then empowerment, right? Yeah. It's like something at one point, unlearned lessons or whatever it was seen as something bad. And now it's actually useful to me. And it's something that I can leverage and actually make productive. So I think what I hear you saying, Rudi, is you're going in and basically saying, hey, you want to express, you don't feel safe to express. I'm going to create an environment, a platform where you can express. And by getting it off your chest, we actually start the healing process and healing journey, because we're not ignoring it anymore. Now,
I do that with the individual, but we can do that collectively with the company. So let's go to an example. Company brings me in and they've just lost, I don't know, $10 million. They went into this venture. It wasn't working. Heads have to roll. And we could do the same thing. We could play the victim game, or we could say, what did we learn? Let's pretend we chose this. Okay.
Let's pretend we chose this.
Let's pretend we chose this. And that's a really good conversation to have with a bunch of leaders, because I want to remind you, the brain perceives 10 million bits of data every single second, but it narrows it down to 50 bits of data based on how you were thinking and feeling last. So if you're looking at 10 million bits of data, so you're looking at a spreadsheet, 10 million bits of data, but you're only looking for things that went wrong, you're only going to notice the evidence, meaning the facts on the paper that reinforce how you were feeling.
All you're doing is altering perception.
Yes.
By saying, okay, let's actually look for how this is good.
And now you're changing the information.
Yeah. Interesting. It's interesting. We have the debate on victimhood, and I keep going back. I've been defining for many years now that victimhood is basically anytime there's part of choices we've made that we don't understand. Because it's like, I didn't see everything. I didn't have all the awareness on something. I didn't have the consciousness to wrap my brain around it. I made a choice in good conscience. I had a good intention, and then something unexpected happened. It's like, well, maybe you didn't understand all of the choice. I think this happens very often with people that come in our lives. I think about the day I married my wife, and within the first few years, I started having a lot of struggles in my marriage. We weren't seeing eye to eye on a number of things. And I remember that I woke up one day with this realization, Kris, when you married her, you thought you were marrying everything you understood about her, but actually you were also marrying every choice she was going to make that you didn't agree with. And in that moment, I was like, wow, that's actually something very beautiful, interesting, and unpredictable about human beings, is that she's not here to follow all of my rules, and I'm not here to follow all of her rules. My rules are for me and her rules are for her. And I look at where drama comes from, or victimhood as we will call it. And often it's people that are saying, hey, like this person came in my life and did something that I didn't like. And it's like, well, did they come in as a perfect stranger and literally wield, dominance against you? Or is this a person you actually let in your life? You just didn't understand all the choices that they came with. Or is this person that's been in your life for 2 or 3 years before you woke up one day and realized they stole from you, or they did something that kind of went against your rule book, but maybe worked with their rule book. And so you go into this process then, Rudi, where you get to help people, not victimhood, but understand, how is this good? And then where do they go from there?
The sky's the limit is where they go from there, because people really become empowered, and they become empowered to start living their life. So many people are scared to make decisions because they're scared to make the wrong decision. Whereas in actuality, the biggest mistake that people make in business is not making a decision at all. And so inaction is actually the biggest cause of loss and failure inside of a company, not the wrong decision. We can make 1,000 wrong decisions and then make the right decision and win it all. But we have to make decisions. We have to be able to move forward. When you can empower people like, hey man, you're going to make a mistake. And if you make a mistake and it's wrong, it's going to be perfect. I actually teach a process that everything is perfect. Everything in the world is always perfect.
Yes.
Because it happened, it means it needed to happen. And so if you do something and it didn't work, who's to say it didn't work? That's just feedback. That's just telling you what you did essentially to get that result drove that behavior. But if you were now to ask more empowered questions, which is opening up the 10 million bits of data again, so we can come to a new conclusion and say, well, what did we learn from this? What did we gain? If we could choose this, what would be the benefit? What do we do with that information now? And so then we start to move forward, and people start to move forward more courageously. And that's where the stress levels reduce, the happiness levels go back up, the creation, inspiration, creativity, logic, reason comes back in, and people move forward exponentially faster.
Okay, so a different way of saying what it is you're doing is you're basically saying human beings are coming to me clogged up, emotionally clogged, trauma clogged, and basically we pull out the toilet plunger, we unclog, and then people become reasonable again, rational again, and then they become productive again.
I liken it to taking a ride on a river, right? We all get into our little canoe, and it's at the top of white water rapid. And as we go down, we hit these rocks and blunders as we're moving. And sometimes we get stuck sideways, backwards, under the waterfall, but we're making our way meandering down. My work is just to remind people that they have the power to remove any of these boulders in front of them so that they can start to meander down a river without resistance, without having to paddle. They can smell the roses as they go by, and life gets to be really beautiful. And, the more people we share this world with, the happier we're going to be, the more fulfillment we have, the more joy we have. But it's really about reminding people that they have the power to be able to move those boulders. And I want to just touch on something, because we can go into a business and help people remove the boulders and their limiting beliefs and all these things, but we're skipping a step, because the step after that is we teach it. We turn around and say, well, there was value. Now what do we do with it? If somebody comes to me and says, man, we just lost $10 million, I say, okay, great. What did you learn? Pretend you chose it. What now, if we look at what you learned, how can you prevent people from doing it again? Can we create a process, an efficiency, something that's going to prevent us from making this mistake again? What are the things we can put in the stopgaps, and who else can we teach or share this with? And there's the real value in all of these experiences, because I believe whether it's in business or whether it's in life, every experience that we have is not about us. Life is not about the individual. It's about turning around and teaching it. And the greatest people that live the most joy-fulfilled lives and abundant lives happen to be the ones that are turning around and teaching what they know.
So there's layers of what you're doing. And it sounds like the first layer is just basically creating a space and an awareness to start figuring out what's not working and how can you take responsibility for it. Once they start figuring that out, what do you like come back and add on top of that?
Then we start to elevate who they are as people. So we elevate their awareness. My job is not to motivate or inspire somebody. It's to fundamentally alter who they are. And what I mean by that is if I can change how you think about something, it's going to change how you feel. If I change how you think and you feel, it changes all of your human behavior. Thoughts produce feelings, thoughts and feelings drive behavior. If you want to have a healthy body, gym's not going to give it to you. Going to workout's not going to give it to you. Changing how you think about your body is going to get you the healthy body. Changing how you feel about your body is going to get you into the gym. But people think, oh, it's just we've got to go. And that's why we don't see people showing up in the gym a week after the New Year's resolution is passed. And it's the first is we have to change how we think or we change how we feel. Then we change all of the behavior that we've got.
How do you change thinking and feeling then?
You have to give people the 2 vantage points. So I've been dropping clues all throughout this episode today. If you can get somebody to take a snapshot of where are they right now, and what would the cost be for them to stay in that? So if I said to you right now, your life is great, here's what you've got. If your life never, ever changed from this moment forward and you felt the same way today, tomorrow, the day after, it never got any better, would you be okay with that? And then I said, if you could live your highest and your greatest potential, I didn't say a good life. I said your greatest life, your greatest potential. If your business could achieve its highest and its greatest potential, what would that be? And if we can see what the end result would be of the greatest that we could do, we now have 2 points of reference. We have staying the same and we have the change. Then we layer in conversations like, what if everything was perfect? What if everything that's ever happened was preparing you for who you get to become? With the vantage point you have now, you have the tools to be who you are going to be tomorrow. And those tools are uniquely qualifying you to be who you uniquely qualified to come here to be. And so they work hand in hand. Now, all of a sudden, people show up very differently. So if something happens in their day, they get a flat tire, a bird poops in their shoulder, they're now not all of a sudden drop an F-bomb saying this day's gone to crap and we've got to start all over again. They're saying, hang on a minute, like, if everything is perfect and this has happened, how is it preventing whatever is going to be coming up?
You're a big believer in visualization.
Yes.
Specifically the first 20 minutes of the day. And you invite all your clients to use that first 20 minutes different than maybe the way they have been.
I teach a process called priming. Now, let me be very clear. Rudi Riekstins teaches priming, but every single person on the planet's priming whether you're aware of the process or not. If you were going to paint a wall, right, you would first prime the wall, sand the wall, fill any holes, make it smooth. Then you would put on another layer of your actual paint, and then you would come back, sand again. So there's a process to preparing it to be the wall that you want it to be. And that would be painting a beautiful, flush wall. Your life is going to be exactly the same way. In the morning, your brain is priming itself for how does it want to function? How does it want to operate today? In the very first 20 minutes of the day, the human brain is the most susceptible to change and influence. So if you wake up and you feel nervous, anxious, stressed, worried, irritated, pissed off, happy, sad, your brain's going to say, got it. That's how you want to feel today. And it's going to actually set a dominant way of feeling. So if you woke up and you felt motivated, excited, you've just won the lottery, life is amazing, and you feel really good, no matter what happens in your day, you're going to drop from that feeling and bounce back up, or you're going to be elevated above that feeling and come back down, but you're going to stay at that dominant state. But the reverse is true. If you wake up and feel nervous, anxious, or worried, and you later win the lottery, you're not going to be excited for long. Your body's going to bring you back to nervousness, anxious. Oh, what if I lose this? What if people want to steal it from me? How much am I going to pay in taxes? Oh, this is unfair. And you're going to live in that place no matter the circumstance around you. And so I teach a process where we literally manipulate the brain in the first 20 minutes so that you can tap into the feeling of living your highest and your greatest potential. And it alters where your brain thinks. It alters where you operate from. You'll make bolder decisions. You'll take greater risks. You'll have more creativity, more inspiration. You'll be happier, more joyful, and you'll be a different person. And so I said to you earlier, we don't want to do behavior. We don't want to change behavior. But if we can change how we think or how we feel in the first 20 minutes, all of our behaviors are going to change organically.
So this entire visualization process, is it something that you religiously do yourself and then invite other people into?
I've been doing it for 13 years. I have produced profound results in my life in just this practice. People ask me all the time, like, oh, give me an example of, what does priming look like and what have you created? And I actually have 6 episodes on my podcast where my wife and I just talk about things we've created that if people listen to it, they say there's no way that stuff is true.
Right.
We just created it. And I want to give you a simple example. Years ago, I was speaking in organizations or supporting people in corporate America, but I wanted to be a speaker on a stage. I want to be invited in front of 3,000 people and walk out as a keynote speaker. But I'd never done that before. Didn't have an agent, didn't have a reel. All I had was what I was doing. And that's not how you get onto these stages. And so my wife and I do a Monday morning walk every Monday, and it's called Miracle Monday. And we'll go for an hour-long walk. And at some point during that walk, she turns to me and she says, "What are you creating this week?" And then I declare something I want to create. She does the same thing. We both hold the vision of each other achieving that and collectively achieving it. And on this given Monday, I said to her, "I really want to be a speaker." And she said, "Yeah, good for you, because you've mentioned this a few times that you want to move your business into that direction." And I said, "Yeah, I really want to be a speaker. I don't have an agent, don't have a reel. All the chips are stacked against me, but I'm going to go into my mind and create this. Will you do it with me?" So she said, "Absolutely." We applied the same practice, the same principle, put it into our minds, created the feeling of what would it feel like to be on stage, to walk off stage, to have people come up to me afterwards saying, "That was amazing. Can you speak at my next event?" And inside of a week and a half, almost 2 weeks, I booked 3 speaking engagements. 3.
Wow.
And I say, didn't have an agent. I knew every one of the people that reached out to me. There were connections that were just made. People just said, "Hey man, I've got an event. Somebody's bumped off. Can you come? Can you help me?" And it just kind of trickled in. And, we're recording this now in May, and I've been on 20 stages just in this year alone, which is phenomenal, without an agent and still without a speaker's reel.
That is actually amazing. That's incredible. My wife and I, we've been huge practitioners of morning visualization. We've been doing it for so many years, and we've done it to get on bodybuilding stage competitions, and we've done it to manifest, doubling our income year over year over year, or, some other miracles. We had a child that had some really severe autism that we were able to get some amazing help for. And it's true. There's something so powerful and very conscious about actually saying, "Hey, if I'm a free agent, I'm going to leverage my agency and I'm going to intentionally put it into an arc of creation for something that I want to produce." I think there's so many people, I call them the sleepwalkers, like just kind of the modern zombie apocalypse, where it's almost like they're being acted on versus acting. And it's just like they're just letting life kind of happen to them instead of life happening for them. And it's hard for me to watch sometimes, because I just feel like sometimes I want to go with people and just want to shake them. I was in Mexico this last month, and I was just standing next to this man who was probably 300 pounds overweight. And there was just, my soul does this, where I just want to hug him, and I want to cry, and I just want to say, I just want to wake him up and say, will you let me help you? I know I don't know you, but will you let me help you? Just kind of figure out whatever this pain is, or why this is happening to you, or what can you do about it? Because I think there's a lot of people that life is just happening, and you've got a tough job. You're fixing a mental health crisis, one company at a time. What do you do, last question, when you get someone who's resistant at their place of work, where it's just like, okay, I'm sure you have an onboarding sequence, you're trying to connect with them, but you probably have some people that meet you and you're like, they're pumped and excited, and other people are like, "Oh man, dude, this is totally can I just go back to work and just be productive?" Like, how do you deal with resistant souls that don't want to grow, or we perceive they don't want to?
You see, there's the key word, right? As you ended it, we perceive people don't want. Everybody wants to change. Everybody wants happiness, joy, fulfillment, or freedom. But people don't always know that it's possible. And so if we look at what drives human behavior, people only ever do anything if and I've been quoted saying this thousands of times, people only ever do what they know they're going to do if they know that they're going to get the results of what they want. If they don't know what's in it for them, they're never going to do it. And so if I go into anybody's life and I say, "You can do anything," and they don't believe that they get the results, they're going to be negative. They're going to push back. They're going to be resistant. And all we need to do is plant a seed. And if we can plant a seed and show people that what we're teaching is going to drive a behavioral result in their life, and that it's possible not only for them to achieve it, but that it's an inevitability if they just put in the work, it now gives them that vantage point. And so I had alluded to earlier that when I start to work with organizations, I first work with the leader of the business for a month or two before we start to impact the company. Because when the leader starts to change, the people in the business start to say, "Hey, have you noticed she's showing up differently?"
So it's example.
And now all of a sudden people start saying, "I want that change."
Yeah.
The leader gets up and says, "Hey, I've been working with somebody for the last 2 months, and I'm now going to bring them into work with you." And everybody says, oh, I need that.
Wow.
Now, you might still have somebody who is negative. I call them negative Nancys. Apologies to anybody named Nancy. But if we have a negative Nancy in the room and they just don't want to do it and they're just not interested, or we can call them back off Bill. But, as they stand there and they're just not interested in what you have to say or do, we just have to give them evidence. And all I do is say to them, what would it cost you to try? And if you put this in and you just started to look for evidence, could you show me that it's not going to work? And if they start to do the work, they're going to feel very differently. And then they kind of start to stack the evidence. And if they stack the evidence that it's working, they get a very different result. I use this example a lot because I love it. For years I used to work out. I have a gym in my home and I would go in there and I would just lift weights and I would do what I wanted to do. I'd read a book on some exercises. I'd go online and find them, but I wasn't tracking or measuring anything. And so I felt good, looked okay, but I didn't really drive major results in my life. Then I hired a personal trainer, and the personal trainer gave me the same trainings, the same techniques, the same everything that I was already doing, just in a different order, but giving me all the same things. The only difference was he said, every single Friday, we're going to do a full body analysis and we're going to look at where you're going. And so week by week, I could see, man, I lost 2 pounds of body fat. I picked up 1 pound of muscle, 1 pound of skeletal muscle. And we started looking. And when I started seeing the evidence, in paper.
It changed the way you showed up.
Yeah, because I couldn't see it in my body yet.
Yeah, now you're getting excited. Now you're wanting to do it more perfect. Now you're going to want to show up differently.
Stacking the evidence.
Stacking the evidence. Rudi, I think it's really admirable what you're creating in the world. And thank you for the positive impact that you're having going into these companies and really helping people learn to see their own potential, see their own divinity. And then from there, taking that confidence into the workplace, becoming more productive, taking it into their homes. You're definitely a force for good, my friend. If people want to learn more about you, what's the best way?
I would just say, well, firstly, thank you so much for everything that you've said and for having me on the show. You can find me on all social handles at Rudi Riekstins or on my website at rudireikstins.com, which is RUDIRIEKSTINS, rudireikstins.com.
Rudi, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, we're going to join you on the next Kris Krohn Show.